Hello, everybody. I am Priya Rao, and this is Real Inspiration. And joining me for this episode, I have two of my favorite guests, two ladies I have had the pleasure of interviewing in person and right in the middle of them, which really makes a difference. Let me tell you, Jen and Sylvia Soska. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for having us, Priya.
Hi, Priya. Thank you for having us at a socially safe distance.
Yeah, hugs next time, hopefully.
Yeah, we're big huggers, so this year has been hard on us.
Yeah.
I know, me too. I really miss that contact, even as a brief a hug or as long a hug. I miss them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I was stockpiling them my whole life. I just didn't know it was for this year.
There you go. And maybe next year, once we're through all this ridiculousness, you can just start one of those lineups at Fan Expo and just be like free hugs.
I think so. I think when we all get to be socially safe next to each other and reconnect, I think it's going to be amazing. The music festivals, the conventions, the classrooms, people are going to be so excited. And it's the little things that human connection that we took for granted before all this. I think it's going to be even more special. And the art after this, oh my goodness, the art's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I think we can appreciate the small stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely going to have a line of hugs. As soon as it's safe to hug people, I'll be like, let's come to me.
Yeah.
I know. I might just do that in the park. And, I don't have a fan base, but I might just stand in the park and say free hugs.
After you do that, you will have a fan base.
There you go. Depends what kind of fans I'll get from that, but we'll think about that later. Well, usually I start these interviews talking about how you got started on your path, and we will go there, but let's just start talking about what we're riffing just here about the positivity and the good that might come out of this time frame. And that's what I notice about your social media presence, is that it is so full of love and light and gratitude and joy. And I think that is the little spotlight we need to see more of throughout this time. So that, to me, I think is in a stark contrast to the kinds of films you make. And I think let's start by putting some maybe stereotypes or misconceptions to rest by saying that the genre filmmaking community, whether it's horror or sci-fi, whatever, might get a bad rap. Like, who are these twisted twins behind productions? So maybe the both of you can chat a little bit about that sort of what seems like a dichotomy, but and maybe where it's not a dichotomy, where it actually fits in together.
Well, absolutely. For me, and I guess it's because of being identical twins, Jen and I always had a social standing that was created by the two of us. And the only other person we really wanted to impress was our mom, who was a huge horror fan. And being little girls and being under 18, you can't watch horror movies. So it was like a devil, like, you guys can't watch that. That's super bad. And then I was like, but my mom's so cool and she's watching these movies. And then eventually, begrudgingly, she let us watch these things with her. And it was never like a negative thing. It was always like fun girl time with mom, and mom would explain the movie and if I didn't understand something. So I guess it was always like a very happy memory doing movies. I feel like it does tackle some really horrific nature, which is something I think why you find so many horror personalities are so light and giggly, because it's like, well, if I'm handling that like for hours on end in my work, what do I have like creeping around in my head that I'm like, oh no, I'm so frustrated with this.
I also think it's incredibly therapeutic.
Yeah.
Some people can never watch horror movies, and that's cool. Everyone has their line. I was one of those little girls that at like 5, I was saying, oh, the prosthetic is lifting, it looks fake. And everyone else would be just horrified by the image. But I think not only the creators of horror, especially if you look at Stephen King, like you'll see he has had a very traumatic life, but people who naturally gravitate towards watching horror movies, they perhaps have had trauma in their life that they're not in control of. And when you have it in the safety of your living room, you know that you can turn it off, and you know that nothing's going to reach out and get you. And it's a really safe way to deal with trauma. And I think you'll find that a lot of the people who love horror have had hard lives. And, therapy is expensive, but horror is free.
Well, what about the nightmares? They come with a cost.
I always feel the nightmares are kind of therapeutic too, because your dreams are when your mind takes to heal. So the things that you're having nightmares about, I don't know how many people study Dr. Freud, but it's fascinating. If you dream about drowning, it means that you're overwhelmed by emotion. And, you know, if you just do a little Google, your mind is telling you some crazy stuff when you're dreaming. I maintain that nightmares are healthy for you. Once in a while, it's like fast food. A good nightmare is very cleansing.
Yeah, and then, you know what? There's different levels to horror. Like there's horror movies even like children can watch, and then there's movies that I don't even think when you're like in your 60s you're even ready to watch them. They handle such a harsh material. But at the same time, I mean, sometimes people have horrific things that happen in their lives, and then they can re-examine it. I mean, Tom Savini is such a great prosthetic artist because he went through a war and he actually saw people being hurt like that. And then he goes and he does like all these great zombie effects. And you're like, where is this fantastical mind coming from? Well, that's how his mind decided to take his experience and then go out and share it in like a safe way.
Yeah, it's cathartic.
Yeah. That is very fascinating to me, the connection you're making with childhood trauma, because I have to say I'm a huge horror fan, although gore, I can only take so much of the gore. So, but
it's
horror,
pretty graphic.
Yeah. Horror and ghost stories and sci-fi, like I love all of that stuff. And that there is some childhood trauma in my own life. So I had never thought of that connection, but it's really, really interesting because you get to see it played out. And also maybe that's why I do gravitate to revenge stories, you know, those, and which is a common theme in some of your work. You know, getting back at people. I really, actually, I love that kind of theme, because in life we're always told, justifiably or not, to forgive and forget. And forgiveness has its own, you know, healing aspects for people, some people more so than others, but also sometimes you just want someone to pay.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. And there are some people that, you know, it's really difficult in this society to, there's so much crime, and it's a horrible thing to admit, but like harassment and stalking and rape, like it's such an overwhelming pandemic in its own way that we don't have enough to, you know, do all of our rape tests and to get revenge and even to bring people to court, because court is so expensive.
And it's also reliving the trauma. There's something very cathartic about being able to see the worst physical torture happening to somebody who you wish would happen. Like American Mary, I had no idea it would have the kind of response it does, but people were like, what's the difference between a male killer and a female killer? And it was like, well, if you're dealing with Freddy or Michael Myers or any of these guys, they're coming right after you. But a woman would be so excessive and so terrifying, and she wouldn't let you off the hook that easy. You're not going to just die. You're truly, truly, truly going to suffer.
Hell hath no fury, right?
Oh, hell hath no fury. If a woman tells you she's fine, you probably should start buying flowers, change your dress. You don't know what you're going to do. Give your pets to somebody to stay for the weekend. You know, just figure out your life.
I'm fine is worse than I'm pissed off at you. I'm fine. Just move.
She can't even tell you how angry she is right now. She hasn't even figured out what she's going to do to you. Like 10 years, she's going to be drinking tea and be like, that's what I'm going to do.
You both have been very open about the fact that you were bullied as kids. So is that part of how your filmmaking career came to be what it is?
I think even when we were little, we were always making up stories because we had each other as our best friends. But when you grow up as an identical twin, it's difficult because you 100% trust somebody. You're in a social standing with somebody else and it's a partnership. But when you're a solo person or a single person, you think about your own survival. So I had to learn when I went out into the world not to trust everyone and treat everybody like my twin. I had to be a little bit more like that. And as a result, you know, we made up our own little stories. We made up stories for like Marvel characters and the X-Men beyond, like between the comic books. And I think that made us into really creative filmmakers because, you know, when you don't have Sailor Moon was created by a girl who had no friends. And she created all those characters. Like, wouldn't it be great if these were my girlfriends? Like, these were my best friends. And I loved Sailor Moon growing up too. So you could almost even feel that energy that's put in there. So I think that the bullying, and also the main theme in all of our films, is something happens to the main character, and the main character could be anybody. It could be you, it could be me, it could be your dad, it could be your best friend, and something happens that should destroy them. It should be the end of their life. And instead of destroying them, it transforms them and they find strength they never thought they could have. And the end of every one of our movies is the face of the main character transformed.
I know, we're such hacks.
I know. But I think that's important.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you, this is not going to be so exciting, but what's your favorite X-Men character?
Oh, I love Storm. Storm is my absolute favorite. The first time I got an X-Men comic was with my grandma, and I was a really, really young kid, and it was right next to Archie. And she's like, which Archie comic do you want? And I looked at Archie, and then there was this one with this woman with this mohawk, and lightning was coming out of her fingertips. And I was like, can I get that Archie comic? And she was like, for sure. And I started reading it. It was when she was leading the X-Men, and I had never seen a character like that. And there's even an art that was the arc where she loses her powers. And there's a part where she dresses in a dress to impress the dude she's with. And she's like, oh, that's an embarrassing thing to do. You should never dress to wear anything unless it makes you comfortable. And that's how you feel like good about yourself. And I was like, a little kid, I was like, wow. I want to be just like her. I love her. She's just like so strong.
That's a great question, Priya. You can tell everything about someone by their favorite X-Men character. Rogue was my favorite X-Men character because I was very lone. I was very misjudged. People always judged me on my appearance. Yeah. And Rogue was like this beautiful girl you couldn't touch. And everyone had like their projections on her as well. But she was strong as hell and she had really great morals. And when you went about how strong she was, I mean, she has the same equivalent like strength as Captain Marvel in the movies because she stole her powers from her. So I love that because you wouldn't think much of Rogue, but you deep down, like she was the badass of badasses.
Priya, what about you? Who's your favorite X-Men?
Well, she was not always an X-Men, but my favorite was the Dazzler.
I love it.
Rock star riding around on her roller skates and making light and laser beams come out from her music. I just love that so much.
I love that you love her.
Did you ever play the old arcade games where you could play as Dazzler?
No, I've played the other ones, but I've never seen one where Dazzler was an option.
Yeah, it was an old side-scrolling like arcade game.
Oh, fun.
I'll find one in Toronto and we're going to hit it.
Yes, definitely. We'll all be our own favorites because there's no overlap. That's the beauty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Sorry, that was a total tangent, but that was
very important.
I feel like people are going to watch that and be like, that's my favorite X-Men character too.
Yeah.
I'm actually sad nobody's ever asked me who my favorite X-Men character is because I always say that Marvel. I've been reading it since I was 5. Yeah. No one's ever bothered to ask, so that's a great question.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm such a fan of the comic books too, so I'm always curious to know. Oh. Yeah. All right, let's start talking about your career. And I know that Poltergeist was sort of the first movie that really kind of put you all on your path because your mom actually sat down with you and did something that most parents don't do after. Well, first of all, most parents probably wouldn't have let their kids watch that movie at that age. But that aside, she sat down and explained to you that it was just a movie and how it was created, which then to you two went, psh.
Yeah, she made the mistake of saying that there were monster makers and they're directors and there's actors and there's storytellers and it was their job to scare you. And I was like, whoa, you're going to have to back up.
Their job
is to scare and they're being paid
and
to make like
they're all playing pretend. I believed it.
And I couldn't even be afraid at that point because my child mind, it was not only like somebody made this to scare me. I was like, you can do this. Wow, I don't have to be a person ever. I can just
Mom, this is what I'm gonna do
for a living. And it was really like Adam's Family because if I had a question, I'd ask my mom, and my mom was old enough to ask, old enough to know, and she never said it in a terrible way. We read Stephen King novels in elementary school, and in the original, is it or Cujo?
In Cujo, there's a pedophile, and my mom said, if there's any words you don't understand in the book, please come over and ask me about it. So I was like, Mom, what's this pedophile? The kid's really scared of him. And she said, that's somebody who hunts children. And I was like, oh no. I was like,
brilliant. Doesn't
tell me anything, but lets me know that there are adults that hunt. Oh my gosh, that's so scary. She's like, yeah, that's why you have to always be careful when there's a stranger. It might be one of those people that are hunting children. I'm like, oh wow, that's even scarier than the dog. Oh my gosh. Like, and I thought it was so cool because there's never anything like, oh my gosh, Santa isn't real. Anything is like, as soon as we start to figure something out, we'd be like, hey, mom. And she'd be like, yeah. Like, is Santa real? And my dad was so happy when we figured it out. He was like, of course not. And then they're like, don't ruin it for the other children. Just let it go. I was like, oh, but they don't. It's like, everyone needs to figure it out on their own.
That was such a nice belief thing too, also to have like as a child lesson. Other people believe in Santa. Our family doesn't believe in Santa, but don't ruin it for other people. Maybe Santa is real.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. Our parents were like,
we got in trouble though for the Stephen King novels because obviously at like grade 3 and 4, we're like powering through these 1,000-page novels. And my mom's like, I tricked them into reading. But the other kids' parents are like, the other kids want to read Stephen King as well because, you know, it's cool. But they say, well, your kids are reading this. My mom got pulled into the principal's office and she said, you mean they've read like 3 or 4 Stephen King novels now in grade 3 or 4?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and she said, are they still 4.0 GPA students? And she's like, then I don't see a problem. And then we had to put little covers over our books so the other kids wouldn't see what we were reading anymore.
But I could never be afraid of it. Even when adults would say, oh, you're not supposed to watch those movies, I would be like, oh, those movies aren't real.
Yeah.
Right, because you had that knowledge. It's so brilliant of your mom to have just laid it all out for you so that it took away the scare factor, but also gave you the power of the scare factor.
Absolutely.
You can create this, you know, and just make your own worlds. It's so amazing.
I think she still doesn't even realize the effect it has because she'll come on set and she'll look around and be like, wow, this is amazing. And be like, yeah, mom, you introduced me to movies. It is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And so your first feature film was called Dead Hooker in a Trunk.
Yes, it was. It is one of those attention-grabbing titles.
Yeah. Well, it certainly does that. And, you know, kudos to you for doing that because you have to, in a world full of so much content, you have to stand out somehow. So that was a film that you made on a real shoestring budget, right?
Yeah. Yes, it was during the original writer's strike in like 2004, 2005. We made
2007.
2007. Wow, early 2000s. But it was we made it for 2,500 Canadian dollars.
Yeah.
It was a lot of people donating their time. When we said we wanted to make a movie, we wanted to be like El Mariachi, what Robert Rodriguez did. And he made it for 7,000 American dollars. I found out later because the star of El Mariachi, Carlos Gallardo, was also cameoing as God in Dead Hooker in a Trunk. I was like, we made it for 2,500 Canadian. We wanted to beat your $7,000. And he laughed. And he's like, oh, girls. It was like 20 grand actually. And then the Weinsteins came in and it was like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I said, what you're saying is I totally beat you.
So we totally beat you on that.
But not only did we want to make a movie that was a grindhouse homage, Jason Eisner had made Hobo with a Shotgun, the trailer at that time. So we thought, great title. What could be as good as Hobo with a Shotgun? So I thought Dead Hooker in a Trunk. And not only did I want it to be a slapstick grindhouse film, there was the Picton killer in Vancouver and nobody was really paying attention because it was sex workers who were being taken. And if you watch Dead Hooker in a Trunk, all of the violence is very slapstick, very cartoon, but the abuse of the sex worker and her life and her being put to rest is the only thing taken seriously at all.
Well, it's a story about a bunch of mess up 20-somethings, and they decide to do something respectful, which is completely out of character for them. And it's just one of those things where it's so ridiculous and over the top. You're like, yeah, it is kind of horrible that this happens. Oh, it's ridiculous that these kinds of things happen and nobody really cares about it. And it was an opportunity to talk about something in a silly satirical way, and then we could be like, oh, and this is, by the way, a real issue that's happening in the world. People be like, that's happening in Canada? And be like, yeah, stuff happens in Canada. We got our own stuff.
Yeah, that's our favorite in our films. We like to trick people into learning moralistic lessons like parables, but there's a lot of blood and violence and stuff. So they're like, wait, I feel more empathetic to my fellow man. How did that happen?
Yeah, I love that. It's like there's a moral to every story.
Yes.
And what I really find interesting also about your work, which you just sort of touched upon, is that you do highlight issues. And that's what's so great about genre filmmaking is that, like, I used to love Battlestar Galactica, you know, the remake.
Great show.
fantastic show. But I'm just a huge fan of that type of sci-fi and like I said, all genre, because it does touch upon so many issues that we deal with every day. But because we're not talking about humans or reality as we know it, we're talking about an alternate universe or something, we don't feel so attached to our own emotions to that. And so I think it's so interesting that you do touch upon a lot of issues like that. For example, with American Mary, you know, people on the surface might say, why do I want to watch a film about people who want to torture themselves and disfigure themselves? But you guys, you ladies have in interviews talked a lot about that community and, you know, trying to understand or at least empathize or not criticize, because maybe some of us can't understand every other lifestyle. It's impossible,
no, absolutely.
I think, right?
Most people won't understand why somebody would want a forked tongue,
Right.
subdermal implants, eye tattooing, anything like that. But years ago, if someone got a tattoo or colored their hair in a punk way, you'd think this person has lost their mind. And if you look into the history of body modification, people have been doing this for a very long time, and there's forms of body modification that are completely acceptable, like circumcision. That is the #1 most popular form of body modification, but people don't think about it because it's more socially acceptable.
Well, it's also a religion that is more widely accepted because there are tribes that do incredible modifications to themselves as a rite of passage, as a rite of growing. And, you know, with American Mary, what we realized is that group was so vilified, and it was really difficult to even reach out to them, because even when they had done interviews in the past, they were kind of baited out by not so kind media, and the media would just be like, oh, look at the freaks, look at the monsters.
Yeah, they would re-edit the interviews to make them, and because we're identical twins, people kind of treat us with that kind of like freak nature. So I know that whole being judged on your appearance, and everyone's like, oh, I already know exactly what you're like. So when we met Russ Fox, who was our body mod consultant, who's also like, he went to medical school, but body modification is his specialty now. And it took a while. We all talked to each other, and then we realized we all had the same passion and curiosity for the same thing. It was so much fun to be able to share that, because people are so fast to be like, well, I see what this person looks like, and I think I know exactly what they're like. And that's kind of the switch of American Mary. Everybody who you're like, oh, that must be a nice person, definitely isn't a nice person, and you have to judge about what's on the inside, not the surface value.
Yeah, the film is really a metaphor for our own travels in the film industry. How in the mainstream you think everything is very tickety-boo and everyone's nice and everyone loves each other and there's law and respect and everything. And then you hear about like the horror genre, and I can't tell you how many times, Priya, that I've told people I make horror movies for a living. They're like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry you couldn't get like a real movie or a good movie to do. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you haven't seen mine, or thank you for the criticism.
They have the assumption, they think they're all slashers, or they don't even, they're so unfamiliar with the genre, and they had 1 or 2 bad experiences, because people like to scare people with horror movies. They're not like, here, this is going to change your soul. They're like, oh, this is going to totally scare you. So people are less likely to have that approach if they've never had like that, I mean, watching it with their mom kind of like experience.
Yeah, and you look at the medical profession, and we, because of the position that they have been allowed to be in, we give them this godlike power, and we assume that they're not like somebody at Walmart who's just like, I can't wait for my shift to be over and I fucking hate all these people. Sorry for the language.
All right.
Sorry for the language, but you get what I mean. And, you know, we give these doctors so much power, and you would look at somebody like our friend Russ Fox, who's a flesh artist, and you would say, oh, he's a monster, what he does to people. Well, I look at people who give like plastic surgery to people without talking about their psychological needs. I think that's a monstrous thing to do. I don't see how somebody can transform into a cat, because that's their ideal of beauty, is less healthy than somebody who basically is turning themselves into a sexual object, not even for their own pleasure, but for somebody else. And with American Mary, one of my favorite things is, even when people hated the movie, we started a conversation about these things, and to say, why is a voluntary amputation seen as a crazy thing, but getting like double G breasts is something that everyone's like, well, she should do it. She should do it. Don't question it. Don't question it. You know?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because we do say, you know, we may judge the person who wants those double D or K breasts or whatever, but we say if it makes them happy, then what's the big deal? She's a consenting adult. And yet the idea of I guess it's just the foreignness of body modification, because it's newer to Western society. Like you say, there are lots of tribes and peoples around the world who've been practicing the various body modifications for centuries, but in Western society, it's still pretty new.
Yeah, very much so. And it's like that biker mentality, because I've known people who've had extensive body modifications where people don't even want to go near them because they're scared of them. And I asked them, how do you live like that? And they're like, I do that intentionally because I don't want everyone to come over. I only want some people to come over. And it's almost a way of protecting themselves with that tough guy kind of exterior. And it's really interesting because when people do that, they're usually very sensitive.
Now, also North American wise, I think the idea of what we consider beauty, I mean, for the long time it was Barbie. And then we started to say that, you know, some people like darker hair or different proportions, and nobody looks like Barbie, not even Barbie. So I think we're having the growing pains of accepting beauty in everyone, because I think there's that Robert Munch thing, the little cartoon that I absolutely love. If you're a good person, no matter what you look like, you're always going to be beautiful because that beauty shines through. But if you're a mean, nasty person, your face is just going to look mean and nasty, and you are going to look ugly because what's inside of you is ugly.
Yeah, it really is about societal norms, right? I don't know if you remember that Twilight Zone episode, the original Twilight Zone, where they're performing plastic surgery on a woman's face, and they finally take off her bandages.
Yes.
Have you seen that one? That to me was such a mind-blowing episode, because for those of you who are listening to the podcast and haven't seen that, maybe you're too young, probably most of you are. When they finally do the reveal, like all the surgeons and nurses are wearing masks, so you can't see their faces. But they reveal this woman, and as they're peeling off the bandages, she's a beautiful blonde, blue-eyed woman by our standards. But in this world, everybody looks sort of like a pig. They've got these pig noses and pig faces, and so they think she looks horrific. It was just, to me, at a very young age, a real like, oh, it's just, but they think that's beautiful.
It's so interesting. It's mind-blowing.
And it's historical too. I mean, a couple 100 years ago, we'd all be like, I better get pregnant because I'm only pretty when I'm pregnant. I better be pregnant all the time, because that used to be the ideal of, wow. And now, like, if there's even been like that period of like, oh, I don't even want to see you breastfeeding. And I'm like, man, if a couple 100 years ago, if you would breastfeed in public, everyone would be like, bravo.
It's just life. That's just the way it was. It's so funny how society goes through these constant learning curves.
Absolutely. I guess we're always trying to better ourselves, but it's a never-ending pursuit.
I can do an analysis.
Yeah. And you both have been, again, pretty vocal about the fact that when you first came out onto the scene, there weren't a lot of female filmmakers for you to look up to. So a lot of the heroes that you quote, Tarantino and Stephen King and, you know, Robert Rodriguez. And have you read his book?
Yes. We called it the Bible on Dead Hooker in a Trunk. We would just like flip over and be like, what would Robert do?
Which I would say is a fantastic book for emerging filmmakers.
Absolutely.
Even now, even with technology making things so much better, maybe because technology has made things so much easier, but his kind of manifesto on guerrilla filmmaking is just brilliant.
It's fantastic. And also the thing that makes it ageless is the emotional journey, because he talks about how El Mariachi came out and he was being wined and dined, and he used all his savings to go to Los Angeles, and they set it up like, your movie is going to be sold. You're going to have the best life ever. And it didn't sell. And he wasn't even able to buy Christmas presents for his family. And his wife was consoling him, and his kids were like, just didn't understand. And he was like, I should have never done this, because it's just his private diary. And I think that's the most important part for everybody to read, because the highs will always be as low as the lows. So just know that, you know, the way of an artist is to feel everything. So you got to read that when Robert Rodriguez, who's like a mega star director, producer, writer, creator, everything. He was at that point where he's like, I should give up. I mean, anyone who knows Stephen King knows that he took, was it Christine?
Yeah.
He threw it in the garbage and Tabitha took it out and sent it out. And that was the one that finally got published. So you can't give up.
It takes years. It took 5 years from the beginning of Dead Hooker to the end of it for it to be released. I was already we were working on American Mary by the time it was done. I remember we were like, and you always assume it's going to be like those Hollywood stories you hear. You make a movie and boom, it goes. Just finish the movie and put everything you have into it. Don't look at the what everything you think it's going to get for you. Just focus on that thing, because as long as you can do that, you'll find success. I know so many people that start a movie, start a project, start talking about something that's like, ooh, if you could just finish one of those things, you'd have something to stand on. And now, I mean, the technology is so advanced, you don't have to buy film. You can film it on your TV. Anybody can make a movie now.
Yeah, and those books are so essential, as well as Lloyd Kaufman's Make Your Own Damn Movie series.
Yes.
But the most important thing to remember is everyone's career is changing and everything that you do is different. I mean, we're living in a different time. What happened to Rodriguez is the Weinsteins discovered him.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen for anybody.
That's not happening anymore.
It's just a totally different thing. Robert Rodriguez shot a movie in Spanish and everyone thought it was an art film. And that's how he like got known. We made a $2,500 movie. Do it different. Like, anyone's got a camera. I was talking to a friend yesterday that she didn't have a script, but she had an idea. And I was like, got a camera, go shoot. You don't need an idea. Don't be trapped on linear stuff. Like, if you have the passion, piece it together.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't know this, but studios have people who just watch YouTube looking for a good idea. So if you have anything, put it on 2 minutes. Someone might discover and give you $100,000 to make a movie, and boom, you're done.
Yeah. Look up what happened with Lights Out. James Wan's company, Atomic Monster, was just going through and like, nope, that one.
There you go.
Great movie, by the way. Fantastic.
Yeah, good. Great
So
concept.
good. Yeah, and so scary.
Yes.
So scary. But talking about just sort of being discovered or trying to just make something, your story of how American Mary came about is kind of like that. You didn't really have a fully fleshed, appropriate metaphor.
Good pun.
Yes, you didn't really have a full idea. You had somebody who was asking you if you had ideas. And so let's just give people that story and let them know who that mentor was of yours.
Well, absolutely. So I fell into that first film folly where I was like, we made Dead Hooker in a Trunk. That's my Reservoir Dogs. Here I am. My whole career is going to be made for me. And it was inspired by Grindhouse. And we sent it to every director involved in Grindhouse. And none of them got back to us except for Eli Roth. And we just sent the trailer and he's like, this is awesome. Send me the whole movie. And he had just come back from, I think it was Inglorious Bastards.
Yeah.
And he said he put it on and he was just going to watch it before he fell asleep. And he ended up watching the whole thing and he loved it. And he just absolutely loved it. And he became like a mentor to us. And I remember we were talking about, I don't know what I'm going to do with Dead Hooker. And he's like, forget about Dead Hooker. Just work on one of your other movies. Which one's going to be next? And I didn't know we needed another movie. I thought that one movie was the one thing. I thought we were done.
So we just sent him a list of our like log lines of our ideas, like this one, this one, this one, this one.
And I was like, we have so many scripts. You know what? You should pick which one, because I wouldn't even be able to know.
And Sylvia had just been privately researching body modification because she thought it was fascinating.
It was
and
awesome.
my mom always taught me, if you are afraid of something, it's because you don't understand. And the first time I saw it, it was an April Fool's thing about two twins that like conjoined themselves. And it said you had to be a twin to understand. And I was like, I'm a twin. I don't understand. So I had to, go for the understanding.
And it was awesome because he was like, well, the girl who does body modification, obviously.
That sounds like the coolest. And we're like, oh, give me 2 weeks to make sure there's no like technical errors and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, because that would be embarrassing. And I go to Jen, I'm like, Jen, I just told Eli Roth I have a script about this. And she's like, oh,
you better get writing.
We wrote it in 2 weeks. And the funniest thing, he never read it. He never had time to read it whatsoever. By the time he saw American Mary, which we dedicated to him because that's how we even got the script to make the movie, we were working on See No Evil 2, and he messages me and he's like, oh, the movie was so good. And he's like, I saw it said for Eli at the end. That was so nice of you guys. I'm like, well,
where did you finally see it? My private theater. Wow.
Oh, nice. And then I told him, and then of course I came clean about the story, and he was like, oh, haha, that's so funny. And he's like,
the only time you can't lie is when you can't pull it off.
And so he said, you did exactly what you should do. So
Nice.
guys,
You didn't lie. You overpromised, but you also over
you
delivered.
delivered
Yeah.
also. So
That's the key, follow through, right? Which I think
Absolutely.
sometimes with emerging artists, it's or just maybe younger artists, they just want to get to the finish line so fast.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily do the work and do the prep.
And
Yeah.
they get too excited about the perks because this job
Yes.
comes with a lot of perks, pretty parties. You get to dress
Yeah.
all nice. People say they love you, especially if you feel bad about yourself. You don't understand how vapid and empty that is until you're actually there. And making great film. Oh my God. Such a great feeling when you make something and it connects with somebody else going through something like you were going through when you made that, and you just bro down about the art. Nothing more satisfying. And I think people forget about that the art is what you should be celebrating, and all that other stuff. It's just there to keep you, like, I don't know what it's actually there for. I think the art's the best.
Yeah, also on the film path, I think a lot of people subscribe to destination happiness. Like when I'm Quentin Tarantino, I'm going to be this happy.
Yeah.
Even Quentin Tarantino, honestly, isn't as Quentin Tarantino as we're all, like, we only know this part of him.
Yeah.
We have to let him be a human, you know? Like nobody even though he says I never have to change my actors and I get exactly what I want. No, come on. Everyone has to struggle. Everyone has a little bit, you know, of the hardship. So if you're not enjoying it when things are terrible, you're never going to be happy when you're happy. I won't name drop who this director was, but this director got the biggest job in the world.
Yes.
And like made for life. Like, trust me, if I had this person's career, I would be like, dude, yay. This person's so unhappy.
Yeah.
And I always say it's like, because this person wasn't happy when they were making this level films. This person wasn't happy when they were writing this level films. And this person is not happy when he's writing, directing, and producing that level films because he is not happy. And you have to be happy in the small moments. And I always tell people, if you're looking for happiness and you like anything else as much as filmmaking, really do that. Really do that, because it's a very hard emotional business. But if you are able to do it and get through it, it's the message that's inside of you that will keep you going. So if you have something that you want to share, like parables or like your life experience, and we really need diverse creators. If you have a story, please tell it. Don't listen to the people who gave up on their dreams that are saying, "Oh, you could never be a filmmaker." They told my mom, like, "Oh, you had twins. Oh, you're gonna have a handful. Oh, you have a tough life. Oh, it's so hard." Now everyone's like, "Oh, you're twins. Oh my gosh, did you always know?" So just listen to the people who've succeeded, and don't listen to no, because don't limit yourself by what you think is possible. If I limited myself by the people who laughed and said, "You're making a movie for $2,500 that's going to launch your career," you're out of your mind, little girl. Nobody's even working.
We didn't actually think it was going to be $2,500. We thought it was going to be free. So. I'm glad. And honestly, we read Rebel Without a Crew, Robert Rodriguez's book, and Lloyd Kaufman's Make Your Own Damn series. And that was it. Like, if you've watched like some film tutorials, you're probably a more experienced director than we were when we started. And we had no idea what we were doing. Just to inspire you to go out in case you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Good. Because if you know too much, you might be discouraged. But go out and do it.
Also, save your money. Do you have a favorite director? David Cronenberg. Watch the director commentary on everything. Oh my God, is it so brilliant?
Yeah, you can be taught by your favorite directors.
Like mini film schools.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm honestly, David Fincher seems like a very intense, though very talented man. I don't know if I could stand across from him. So listening to him at a distance, that's director commentary, I feel very safe to learn from him from there. Like David Cronenberg, I'd be right there, but David Fincher, I might want to be like over there and be like, "You're right, sir."
I feel he's such a technical perfectionist. You would missay one thing and be like, ugh.
I don't know if my artist self-esteem can take letting any great David down.
Well, let's talk about our very own David, because you both had a really unique opportunity to remake a David Cronenberg film. And that was just a couple of years ago, Rabid, which actually was just released last year, but it's been tell us about that experience and what it was like for you to remake one of your role models, your idols' films.
It was one of the greatest experiences, and it came after feeling so well. you get knocked around in this business, and you're trying to make a name for yourself. And it's funny, 10 years into his career, he remade The Fly. So 11 years into our career, we had the opportunity to remake one of his films. So I was like, oh, this is serendipitous. This is how people are going to figure out who these Soska sister characters are. And it was honestly one of the most challenging movies we've ever pulled off, but also incredibly rewarding. I remember so many times on set something crazy would be happening, and our costumer Morgan Newson, she would come over and she's like, that's because there's so much energy. You guys, everybody's making something and making something so big. Of course it's crazy. That's what happens when you make something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, it's just like a painter slapping paint onto the canvas. Sometimes it splatters off, but that's, art.
I really just wanted to make a tribute to David. Full disclosure, I usually hate remakes because they're made by somebody who maybe doesn't feel like a fan of the original. Right. I will say, like Alexander Aja, he loves the movies he remakes. Yes. Like
he's the king of remakes.
The Hills Have Eyes. Whew, I love the remake even more than the original, but I love it because he loves the original so much that he made it that much better. I knew that they were going to be remaking Rabid with us or without us, and I really wanted it to be with somebody who not only loves but understands David's work. Actually, at the time, there was a script that had come with it, and it had been sent to David, and David's wife had just been passed as well, and it was with the pressure to involve him, and he said, you guys just don't really know about my work. So they actually Googled Cronenberg, and him being one of our greatest influence, Soska came up over and over again. I remember during our interview, they said, what, can you explain why he didn't like the script? And I was like, oh no, you sent it to David? Oh no. And then she spoke for like 13 minutes about like David's like body of work. And they said, you handle the creative, we'll handle the money. And because we appreciate your knowledge, but we do not
understand Cronenberg 100%, which is weird. And Jen was like, you know what? We're lucky that we're making a David Cronenberg movie and not a David Lynch movie. Because if it was a David Lynch movie, even I couldn't understand what we were making. So it would just be.
I'd have to be put in a trance while I'm on set.
Yeah, and it was so interesting because at the very end, we actually got to meet David, which was like. Terrifying, exciting, the greatest experience ever. And
such a gentleman. Wow.
And it's so funny because part of making the movie was like, I always wanted to sit next to David and talk to him. And we have so many mutual friends, and he had heard about us so much. We didn't actually have to make the movie. He was wondering when we were actually going to do that. And I was like, oh!
He's so humble. He was flattered by how much we loved him. And then the most magical thing happened. He talked to us about Dead Ringers.
Oh, it was so
he
much
loves Hungarians fun. And he loves twins, and we love David Cronenberg, and it's our favorite. And I kept trying to be like, David, you can leave if you want to. Like, I know you're working. He's like, oh, girls, you're my excuse for getting out of the house.
And I was like, ah!
And the greatest experience of my life to sit across from that wonderful man and talk about Dead Ringers and twins.
And most people don't know that he has a hearing aid. So it's like super high tech. He can set it so he can just block out everything and then hyper focus on, which I was like, this is probably the coolest thing that's ever going to happen to me.
Yeah, that's technology for you.
Ever.
Oh, yeah. It was a very fun meeting, too, because we went to the place that we had to get to like an hour before, and everyone was just in their laptops. Literally paid a girl $100 to just go. Just go. We're like, here's $100. And we were like, everyone's like, who will go? And she's like, well, I could use it. And I was like,
well, I offered her 50, but she was like, I really can't leave. And I was like, would 100 make you leave? And she was like, I don't want to take that from you. But I was like, I really need this table.
I just need you to
go. But he said the movie ended up where it should have been, which was nice. I asked him if he would have wanted to see it, and he was like, you want me to see it? I was like, well, you're the only person I actually care what you think about it. Right. So still in the air. Have no idea what he thinks.
I'm glad with the reaction to Rabid, because my favorite thing is even people who don't like our version of Rabid, and people don't know that I love this, they crap on us and say, but David's a genius. No one was saying he was a genius when he first released Rabid. So now even if people don't like us, they're lifting David up. Yeah. So it's a gift that keeps giving, really.
Yeah. I don't care. And then there's the one guy who hates David's work and didn't like ours either. And I was like, damn you.
I love it when someone starts a review with, I hate the original director. I don't like his films, so I'm not going to like this. And I didn't. And I'm like, well,
I read the whole, I'm like, did I win them over? No.
Well, let's talk about some of your other fans, and you do have a rather rabid fan base.
Yes, we're hoping they get their shots. No, we're so lucky. We have the nicest people supporting us. We've been spoiled.
And as female filmmakers, because we've talked about how there weren't many for you to look up to.
Yeah.
Do you feel a responsibility in that sense?
Absolutely. I think that in my 20s, I really resisted the labeling of being a female director because nobody wants to be called the best female director because it means like, does that mean it's like I just not very good in everyone else's, like it's just the minority? But then I really understood the importance of the visibility. One of our only female huge idols was Mary Herron, who is now a dear friend of ours. She even gave us editing tips and advice on Rabid. And to have that kind of relationship where there's no judgment and there are just some insane scenarios that like a text or an email saying, this happened and I felt that this was very wrong. Is this true? And them saying, yeah, this happens. No one talks about it. People are weird. You stood your ground. Good for you. It just makes such a difference because when I was first starting out, they really take advantage of young artists. And the more excited you are, the more eager they are to take advantage. And then they use well, if you don't do this, you won't get to work in it. Nope, you'll never work in the industry again. So having that kind of support is huge. And I don't think that there's a point of going up unless you're sending the elevator down. I don't want to be at the one to win the race. I just want all of us to kind of make it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we started before they had the giant campaigning for the so-called female director thing. And I mean, because of being identical twins, we've seen awful behavior from people and
very prickly responses also very shallow.
And also we had to our career span during the growing pains of the Me Too movement, where a lot of the time something wouldn't necessarily be brought to the forefront, but because Jennifer and I were bosses on set and the other female employees would come over and team members would say, hey, this happened to me, or God forbid it happened to me or it happened to her. And then all of a sudden, and then people would be like, well, don't just say anything, don't rock the boat, and be like, absolutely, I'm rocking the boat. Absolutely. Because the reason the boat needs to be rocked is because it wasn't rocked before. Everybody kept their mouth shut and this behavior was allowed to change. So, and I mean, I've never been able to shut my mouth, much to the regret of everybody around us. But I used to think, oh no, all these horrible experiences happened to me first as an actress and as a new director and so on and so forth. But then Jennifer and I actually talked to Telefilm about these experiences, and they were like, oh my gosh, that's amazing that this is what's going on. What can we do to change those experiences so that we're protecting people, we're making an environment that's safe, and it doesn't feel like it's only falling on certain people. So the two things that they're doing is mandatory sensitivity training for everybody, because the world has changed. How we speak has changed. Some people are very comfortable on set and they think some things are funny when they're not. And if you know right ahead that we're talking about things and we're making sure that set is fun and safe for everybody, and not just a core group that just decides to have like bully behavior, then we already know what the expectation. So when it happens on set, that expectation isn't met, it can be addressed right away. And also intimacy coordinators, which hasn't been aware on set, but I know HBO is starting and a lot of different companies are starting. It's like a stunt coordinator, but it's so when there's an intimate scene, it's not a free-for-all. You know what's happening, everybody feels safe, and it doesn't have that position where it feels like the actress has to do more because she's letting the team down, because there's so many scenarios where they don't tell everybody what's happening. They don't say, oh, this is how the scene's going to go. And then there's new pages and it's something that the actress doesn't feel comfortable doing. And there's nowhere fun for her to talk to. She can't talk to her scene partner. She can't talk to the director. She can't talk to the producer because they all expect this. So the intimacy coordinators to keep any kind of thing like that happening. So everybody feels safe and we can move forward also in this COVID exchanging, making sure everybody's safe and COVID free to be able to do those intimate scenes. So you do feel safe.
I think having the female perspective really changes the conversation of what is safe and what is people's line. I won't single out any actors, but I've had one particular actress tell me what her line is. Yeah. And then on set with the energy and she's in the costume and everyone's like, wow, you look so hot. And she's like, well, I'll do this now. And I was like, no, you're not going to do this. And she's like, well, now I'm comfortable to do this. I'm like, no, you're not comfortable to do this, because also this person was a child actor. And I've seen very much psychologically with child actors, the desire not to make you upset.
Yeah.
Because when you're a child actor, there is child abuse, and a lot of it has been, and children don't know what their rights are.
And
They
also,
don't know.
you're in the movie industry. You don't want to lose that privilege you have.
And as a child, what you've been told is you're wasting time and you're wasting money, more
Yeah.
money than you could even imagine as
Yeah.
a little child. So it's beaten into you. And I've worked with lots of actors that are like adult actors, but a lot of actors who have started as children. And I've noticed that on set, their line changes, and they will always try to make the director happy.
Right.
It's almost like in a relationship when you're dating somebody and they got out of an abusive relationship and they're like, but I'll do this. Are you okay? Do you want this? And I'm like, I don't need any extra. I just need what I asked for, and you don't need to do that. And that's why the intimacy coordinator has to get between, I feel, the actor and the director, because the actor will want to lessen what they're comfortable with for that reason.
And also, it's nice to have a therapist on set, because honestly, you're doing night shoots. People you don't even know if you have a personal issue and you're working that long, it might come up, and you might. If
there's one human relations person on every set,
oh my goodness,
would sets run different.
Well, it's hard because you feel like you're going at war. Sometimes you're even doing images that your team doesn't even know. They're going to see you're making a scenario, and they're going to get triggered, and then they're not going to be able to work because they're traumatized from something. And I'm
not going to say there aren't men who are sensitive, but I think now that we're having more female involvement, we're naturally more nurturing, so we think more about like, well, instead of the sex scene, we're not like, oh cool, there's going to be sex. We're going to be like, okay, so how are we going to shoot it? What is she going to wear?
Absolutely has to be there. But also men are, I feel like it would be nice for men to have that opportunity, because that happens to guys on set all the time too, because they're like, oh, well, you're a guy, you're totally fine with this. And
guys have no respect for nudity. It's a joke on set, how they're treated.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, again, the intimacy coordinator, so they don't lose any of the bro points or anything like that, because then the intimacy corners are being like, well, this is what's on the page, so that's what we're going to shoot. I know it's the weirdest thing to even think about. We're all adults playing pretend, but we're like, you better make sure everyone feels safe while we're playing pretend.
But I love that you both are such strong proponents of that and of making people feel safe. And you're such fabulous role models for the girls who are coming up in this industry, not just the girls, but especially the girls, because they need to see themselves reflected out there, right? Everybody needs to see that they can be or do what their heroes are doing. And if they don't see heroes that look like themselves, then they don't necessarily think they can do it. So I want to thank you both, Sylvia and Jen. It's such a pleasure. Again, I wish that we could have done this in person, but we will again in the future.
We will many times.
Absolutely. This has been such a joy to learn about your craft and just you're two solid human beings. So thank you for spreading such joy.
I wish I could hug you.
Hugs. Thank you, ladies. And we will see you hopefully in the flesh sooner than later.